2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and Stephanie Burke. And I'm going to put that back in program, put that back up. Hopefully I didn't miss a commercial. Maybe I did. Doesn't matter. YouTube only, baby. We don't know what's going on the radio. We can't be held responsible. All right, so we're getting back into the discussion here tonight. We're talking about this story from The Hollywood Reporter, War Over the Conjuring, the disturbing claims behind a billion-dollar franchise. Cameron brought up a great point.
Yes.
That the opposing production studios, the opposing companies that are putting out horror movies, who have seen these movies take off and bring in big money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a reason for that. When you look at the horror landscape, you know, we kind of went away from the haunted house stories for a while.
Right.
And they're starting to come back into vogue. And these Conjuring stories have been based on somewhat true stories. Mm-hmm. And that's going to bring eyeballs because people love the possibility of is it true or is it not. And let's be honest here. Let's be fair. Let's put this out there. They're not making these movies for the paranormal audience.
No.
They're not making these movies for the people who know who Ed and Lorraine Warren are and have studied their work and read their books.
Right.
And who have investigated and who have hung out with their nephew, John Zaffis, and all these people that are tied. They don't care about, I mean, they like taking your money.
Right.
But it's more about all these other people who are out there that don't follow all that. And really couldn't care less if the Warrens have credibility or not. They just want to go see a good horror movie.
Exactly.
And so
you're appealing to the general audience at that point.
And it's we talk about that with TV shows, that's who they're going after. They're not going after you, the investigator.
Right.
So if that's the case, if that's who they're trying to market these films toward, it doesn't matter if you can call into question the credibility of Ed and Lorraine Warren, because in the end, a person that likes horror movies just wants to go and see a good horror movie.
Yep.
And the believability factor, when they see based on a true story, there's a good portion of the audience that doesn't even bother to take that into account because they just assume that it's BS anyway. Mm-hmm. So that part of it is certainly on the table that, does it even matter if they have credibility for the sake of the film franchise? For the legacy of the Warrens in the paranormal world, that's a different story.
That's basically the only, place that it's hitting hard, or it's a question of discussion, because I think like some people said, they're trailblazers, they're pioneers in the field, and people are feeling let down or disappointed by the story. But again, the intention behind putting this out was not hey, this is what happened. It was an agenda.
All right. We do have another caller that's trying to call in, but be aware that if you do call in, when you call in tonight, you won't hear us on the phone. You're going to hear what's playing over the radio, which is a football game. So just be aware of that happening. And we'll try and when we go to the calls, we'll try and get them on the air as quick as we can,
right,
so that you don't miss what it is that we're talking about. But the numbers are 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. But yeah, I didn't take that into account. That poor Chip, that's why he didn't hear us, because he was trying to listen on the computer,
right,
because he was getting the game on the phone. So anyway, so just be aware of that if that's going to happen. But we want you to call in. We want you to chime in. We want you to share your thoughts. We're getting some great calls tonight, and I know that a lot of you out there have opinions. I'm seeing the chat room lighting up with people that are asking questions too, so we'll try and get to some of those as well. Stephanie's trying to monitor that as it goes along.
Right.
508-996-0500. Good evening. You're next on Spooky South Coast.
Oh, hi, Tim.
You can hear us okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
All right.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hang up, but I had no idea what was happening. All I heard was a Geico commercial.
We didn't know what was happening either till you told me, so now we know.
No, the only point that I haven't heard anybody bring up yet is why they outwardly were Catholic. Like, that was something they always covered. So why, if they were outwardly Catholic, is this not something that should be discussed?
Right. I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but it really is part of the big, larger question here is, can you, does it circumvent the message that you're trying to put out there if you're doing this one thing that goes against this belief set that you're supposed to be standing for?
Yeah, but that's not just one thing. That's a big thing. Especially when I believe I read a while back when they were investigating the Conjuring house. That family was Catholic, and they trusted the Warrens because of that, because they shared like a faith system.
Well,
So,
I mean, there's also a lot more to that story than Hollywood presented.
no, I know, because I remember watching the movie and falling into this rabbit hole about it, and just going in, and I watched the whole documentary about the woman that currently owns the house. But I just think that if you're outwardly, what's the word I'm looking for? You're basically saying that you are this specific religion that is so strict, and you're using it to make people comfortable and trust you, then it's definitely worth something to discuss, because it's not just like, oh, okay, well, I missed confession. It's you had somebody living in your house for so long, underage or younger, I should say, and you were sleeping with them. That's a big thing.
I mean, see, I don't have any belief set in that mind. So in my mind, like I can understand your point of it being this affront to the things that you're supposed to be holding dear. But at the same time, like if a Muslim person told me that they had a BLT for lunch, I wouldn't be like, well, you're just a phony, you know?
Well,
I was going to say ham, but I figured BLT was better.
Well, look at all the evangelists. I can't talk tonight. The ones that they're building these Mecca temples in the Midwest. Like, was it Ted Haggard? Is that what his name was?
I know this has been going on for a long time. It's not even the ones that are doing it now. It's been going on for decades.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to come out and say, okay, well, this is the faith that I practice, and it's directly related to what I'm doing, like publicly, I think it's definitely worth the conversation.
It also doesn't help, though, that the religion gives you an easy out for when you screw up on things like that either. Because all you have to do is
get me started on Catholicism.
Yeah, all you have to do is, say, "Oh, I sinned. I'm sorry. I forgive you. God was testing me and I failed, and now he's forgiven me." And it's just you get that easy out. So,
Oh
but,
my goodness.
But that's definitely a great point that, they're trying to present themselves as something, and this is something that kind of breaks down that whole persona.
Exactly. I think that's a huge difference between what Chip was talking about and how they took his sexual preferences and spun it into something really dark versus these people who kind of came off as pious, and they actually did have a dark side. There's a big difference in that. But I agree with him that things, if you're doing one thing, like hosting a TV show and working with children, that's a whole different subject than what the Warrens did. I believe that people should have their privacy, but if it directly contradicts in such a huge way, then it should probably be discussed.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the call.
You're welcome.
Glad that we worked it out. That you didn't think you were calling into the football game.
Oh God, I don't know. It was easier just to text you.
All right. Well, you have a good night.
Bye.
Take care. And if anybody else wants to call in, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. I know a lot of you out there listening want to talk about this. The chat room is blowing up. There's a ton of people in there. We have a lot of people watching the show. So if you want to call in, 508-996-0500. One point that caller made, going back to the point that the caller made, one thing about those points is what I'm trying to say, is when talking about the religious aspect of it, part of what it is that they were doing was operating as demonologists.
Right.
So it's not just being paranormal investigators. It's being paranormal investigators who can specifically work with these demonic entities. And in doing so, they will tell you that you have to be very firm in your faith and very firm in the foundation of your beliefs to be able to do that. Do you think that you can be firm in that foundation and firm in those beliefs and able to go up against these demonic entities if there is a part of your life or your lifestyle that is incongruous with having that foundation?
Your sex life and fighting demons don't matter.
But that might be kind of a little bit facetious there. But look at it from this perspective of if if you need that firm foundation in your religion,
Well,
could one little thing chip away enough of it?
what I'm trying to get at before you started talking again was, bottom line, being born and raised Catholic, being a demonologist is 100% against the Catholic religion. So
They claim that they were doing this
doesn't matter.
with the permission of the church.
No, you would never. They just don't, I think, I mean, I can say, doesn't Amy have a friend that works with the Vatican that does this type of stuff? I can't remember the person's name now, but either way, it's like the one person that's accepted with doing this stuff.
Well, I mean, there's more now. They just had a whole influx of exorcists in the last couple of years.
Being an exorcist and being a demonologist is totally different. I mean,
well, yes and no. I mean, you're
according to them,
you're a lay demonologist. I mean, you're not somebody that's working within the church,
right?
But
or with the church's blessing.
You're supposed to be following the same fundamental principles.
Like what I do is 100% against the Catholic religion.
Well, of course. Oh, you mean the psychic medium stuff? Oh,
such a jerk.
I'm just teasing you.
Oh God.
I'm just teasing you.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, if you're going to do that work, if you're going to go up against something that is negative,
right?
And then let's take the religious aspect out of it. But if you're going to go and do battle with demons, if demons are real, and you're going to go and do battle with them, shouldn't you have some degree of the moral high ground? Shouldn't you have something? Shouldn't you not? Do you have to be unflawed if that's the case? And I understand. I understand nobody's unflawed. I understand that. But I mean, do you have to not have weaknesses that can be exploited? By your own cause, by your own doing.
I was gonna say, who in this world is like that?
But this is by your own doing,
right? Not to cut you off, but Chip and Mama Cheryl just let me know that's Adam Blay.
Oh yeah, Adam Blay. Yep.
Blay.
But there's. See, this is where it's hard.
This is tough because you can't really answer that.
Well, it's hard for me because I don't believe in anything, and I think a lot of it is kind of, just a bunch of man-made rules that people are applying to divine beings, and it's not really the case. So I honestly think that if you are, going up against demonic entities, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be pious because it doesn't matter. It's all a bunch of man-made rules. God didn't come down and say you could only have one wife. That was not something that God ever said.
Listen, I was born and raised Catholic, very religious actually, and I have always said that the Bible is man-made.
And so is all of these conceits.
Because I'm going to continuously eat meat on Fridays, and if I go to hell, I go to hell. But I don't believe that somebody, that God sat down and told me I couldn't do that. I've told people for years that, doing what I do, being a psychic medium, is against the Catholic religion and everything to do with anybody who believes it. But why would I have this gift passed down through my family if it wasn't a God-given gift and I wasn't meant to help people? And some people might look at it differently, but I'm not doing any harm with it. So, I mean, religion and this field of religion and anything just do not mix, period. But I get what you're saying, but it's one of those things that are never going to be resolved.
Let's get to the point of this idea that, okay, we've kind of established, and this is also my belief, but that, what the Warrens were doing at home was their business. Just like if there was physical abuse between them.
Yes.
And which is part of what's being claimed here. Is it good? No, it's not good.
No.
But does that
awful.
mean, but can you say because one might have smacked the other one around, and we don't know exactly what happened. There's different things that happen in people's relationships. Some people's relationships are physical like that. I know plenty of men and women.
Honestly, I think I know people that are happily married and do that type of thing.
Right.
I don't agree with it, but whatever. It's not my life.
But sometimes they just go after each other, and there's.
I don't necessarily hang out with them, but
right. And
I know of people.
Doesn't mean that we think that it's right, but whatever.
Right.
It's
but again, is it a personal belief or is it what society tells you need to believe?
That's different than somebody coming to you and saying I'm being abused.
Correct.
Being
absolutely.
abused is different. That's something that you're not.
Again, I told you I've been through that. so I know. But
if you're I'm trying to clarify what I'm saying so
Right.
that nobody thinks I'm pro abuse. But that being said, some people are just like, no, when we get pissed off, we just beat the crap out of each other and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And some people's relationship that works. So maybe that has something to do with that. The thing that bothers me about this is that Penny says that she's being manipulated to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also saying that she took part in manipulations. So she's saying that they wanted her to try to portray herself as a victim. They wanted her to say that Ed raped her. They wanted to say that she was not a willing participant in this.
Well,
But then-
I'm sure because it has to do with the nature of the legal situation, and it would benefit the legal team if she said those things.
But it also, she's willing to put up the information saying that she helped fake some of these
Right.
paranormal claims, which I find to be disturbing, especially where it's not. If she was coming after them and she had a reason to want to go after them and discredit them, then it would be easy to say, we had this relationship that I wasn't, that I was 15 years old and I didn't think that it was appropriate. And in today's world, people would give her the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. People would still look at it and say, why'd you stay for 40
I was going to
years?
say that's the part that doesn't make sense is why would you live there for 40 years? Because, whether or not, okay, one can argue she was a stupid child, right? We've all done stupid things in our teenage years. I know I have. And at the same time, you hit a certain point where you're in the driver's seat. Whatever you were taught or whatever you went through, you're an adult. You make
Right.
your own decisions.
One of the comments I
So-
saw was Stockholm Syndrome. This was not
Right.
Stockholm Syndrome. But it's okay. Like, if you're Penny, you can say, listen, I loved Ed Warren.
Right.
Maybe she loved Lorraine too. And maybe,
Yep.
and she can say, I was a fully willing
Yes.
participant in this relationship. However, it was still wrong of Ed to start it with me when I was 15. He should have waited till I was legally age of
But I
consent.
honestly do not think that she thought that. I think
No,
that
I
she
don't
was
either.
happy and content in this situation. She went willingly. She lived with him willingly. Obviously, Lorraine was aware of her presence that was in her home. She knew what was happening. This clearly states on this page that I'm looking at right now that one night he would sleep downstairs and another night he would sleep upstairs. And
So-
if they were happy like that, then they were happy like that. One could also argue that maybe all of the information wasn't there because this is not coming from Lorraine's side and looking at it from a legal point of view or, a different point of view or as a victim of domestic violence. Maybe Ed was not the person everybody thought we were, and he was controlling Lorraine as well, and she had to go along with this for her own safety. We don't know.
It's possible.
You know what I mean?
But
And Penny might not have been aware of that.
my point is that, Penny could have, and we can argue whether or not we want to say,
Right.
telling the truth or not, but she could have turned the circumstances in a way that portrayed the Warrens negatively.
Right.
She did not.
Honestly, I would like to see an actual copy of the affidavit myself.
I'm sure that that's somewhere where you can
I was
see
thinking
it.
about that on my drive over here because, an article done by any type of media is going to be
maybe
twisted
it
no
might
matter
have
what.
to wait until the case is settled.
Correct.
But you will be able to
But-
see it. The
This is just portraying bits and pieces, which we all know because we've all read media. You work in media, that things can be portrayed as an agenda. Bottom line for anybody, it doesn't matter. It can be twisted. You can take quotes, and people are misquoted daily. You know what I mean? If I read an actual legal document that was, signed, sent to court, whatever it might be, that is totally 100% different than what this article might be. So
I mean,
I
not
take
always. It depends. It depends on what's information is included and
Right.
and how it's entered.
but
into
it's
the
not always
record.
perfect.
But
But that would be.
my bigger point here is that she could have turned that scandalous aspect of it into more of a negative if she had a reason to attack them. I don't think that she was going after them in any way. I don't think she was trying to hurt
No.
them in any way or hurt their reputation. So the point of that being is she brings up this paranormal fakery.
Right.
And so I don't think that information is being shared as a way to discredit the Warrens either. I don't think she's trying to break down whatever it is. I mean, if you lived with somebody for 40 years, you probably were you're probably a pretty big fan of them.
Yeah.
You probably like them as people. You probably don't want to destroy their reputation.
Yep.
So for her to come out and say, I helped in faking some of this paranormal evidence is something that is disturbing. Now, you brought up the point where we don't know if Lorraine went along with this, if Lorraine was, forced into the situation.
Right.
But this is something that is very, very telling about this situation. And I'm gonna read this verbatim from the story.
Okay.
So this is coming from the Hollywood Reporter story. But Lorraine seems to have been intent on preventing any sordid aspects of her story from being portrayed on screen. Her deal with New Line to serve as a consultant on or model for The Conjuring includes unusual restrictions. The films couldn't show her or her husband engaging in crimes, including sex with minors, child pornography, prostitution, or sexual assault. Neither the husband nor wife could be depicted as participating in an extramarital sexual relationship. Talent attorney Jill Smith says she has never seen specific language barring such depictions, though individuals selling rights to their stories sometimes restrict portrayals. So this information is put into the contract that these things are specifically mentioned. And it's like one of those situations where you say, well, wait a minute. Why are you bringing this up? We didn't bring this up. Why are you talking child pornography and sexual situation? Why are you talking about this? Because nobody brought that up.
Right.
So
what's the point?
It sets alarms off when you
Yes,
want
but
to
at the
put
same
it
time,
into that.
if you still look at it from a victim point of view, maybe she just didn't want people to know about what she went through. Or maybe she was involved and she didn't want people to know that either. We don't know. But that is bizarre. But again, do we know if that's standard or not? Unless we've signed that contract ourselves or we are familiar with that type of contract.
I'm going to put it in all mine from now on.
Okay.
So, John Brightman, if you're listening right now, nobody can depict me as having sex with minors because
that's horrifying.
I never have, and
horrifying.
That would be really weird. But, and I also do take issue with the idea that this somehow hurts their relationship. Like, that's not you can say what you want about does it hurt their reputation. You can say what you want. Does it hurt their standing in the paranormal community? And we can discuss and debate all of that. We can't say that this makes you think that maybe they didn't love each other based on this because you don't know the nature of that relationship. And it's quite possible that you can love somebody and have a relationship with another party involved and it's fine with everybody. It happens.
Now,
it's weird, but it happens.
Cheryl just messaged me and said it's not standard, but she has seen it in life story contracts.
Where those specific things mentioned. So that's... So then I wonder if those people that had it mentioned also would have reason to have it mentioned.
I don't know.
It's
something we can't answer.
Was it the Roy Moore biography film? Was that what it was?
Oh my God.
So just to give you some ideas, okay? This is what we're talking about when we're talking about this story. This is a great quote, by the way. This comes from one of the attorneys who specializes in legal clearance for productions. I do think the public understands that based on means that some liberties with storytelling have been taken, says attorney Lincoln Banlow, who specializes in legal clearance for productions. It's a less enjoyable film if the ghost hunters are a bunch of assholes no one likes. You have to have your protagonists be likable. And that's a huge part of every based on a true story movie. They try to make all of these people out to be heroes, and a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are, or they're very flawed, tragic heroes if they are, because you don't want to portray that in there. You don't want to portray the fallibilities of your hero unless it's something that plays into the story. Otherwise, you look at it and say, why are you mentioning that? That doesn't seem to fit into the story that you're trying to tell. So, it wouldn't be something that you would have be part of the script. Nobody would ever say, oh, and just let's just have a scene for no reason where all of a sudden we show Ed and Lorraine at home and Penny just comes out of her room and sits on Ed's lap. Mm-hmm. And let's not even explain who Penny is. Let's just let it happen and then just make the audience wonder. Like, they don't do that. That isn't part of storytelling.
No, it wouldn't make any sense.
But here's the heart of this all. The Conjuring comes out 2013, $318 million. One of the biggest horror films of all time. Annabelle comes out a year later, $257 million. The Conjuring 2 comes out 2016, $320 million. And then Annabelle Creation comes out this year, $306 million. Mm-hmm. If not for those numbers, I don't think we ever hear this story.
No.
Because this lawsuit wouldn't have been filed against them.
Right.
And then we wouldn't have the information that Penny put in there.
Mm-hmm.
So for people that are wondering, this comes from the Hollywood Reporter story. There's filmmakers could easily, I'm just going to read this part too. Filmmakers could easily argue that the relationship is not material to the story and justify sticking with the happy Hollywood version. So what if people believe they have a good relationship, says an attorney. If I were in this mix and the filmmakers knew all about this other woman, I don't think I'd tell them what was necessary to make changes or adjust the story. Because it doesn't fit the narrative of what you're trying to tell.
Right.
But anyway, so for Penny, now in her 70s, it seems she has never received a cent from the Conjuring movies. Well, why would she?
Mm-hmm.
Though she clearly has no love for Lorraine, she still seems to have fond feelings for Ed. Though their relationship ended in 2003 and she subsequently married, she remained friendly with Ed until his death in 2006. She still seems to be pondering her past and wondering about Lorraine's role as well as her own. As I'm older now, I can't even fathom why Lorraine let me stay there, she said in an October recording. Lots of times I think about, why did I do this? Why did I screw my life up like this? Sometimes I get angry thinking about it, how so much was taken away from me. So that is...
It doesn't make sense.
But that is the only part of this story that is an attack on the Warrens.
Right.
For her to say that she felt like she wasted those years of her life. Again, why'd you stay for that long?
That's a long time to stay. A long time.
But
if you're unhappy.
Also,
a very long time.
That means you got married in your 60s.
Correct. That's I was just doing the math
50s.
myself in my head.
And you still remained friendly with Ed after that.
Right. But to say that what she said about Lorraine doesn't make any sense because you lived in her home.
Oh, no, I think you can live in somebody's house and not like them.
No, that's just weird. Go get your own house.
Well, there's also a difference, too, of, if put it this way, if you like somebody and you want to stay with them, and part of that condition is that you have to live with somebody that you don't like, maybe you stay with that person that you don't like.
Yeah, I don't know.
It happens. The big question here, though, and I want to bring this back to what we were talking about with Chip.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we get super gossipy, which is all right, because we can do that from time to time. But there's a lot of kettles calling each other black this week.
Agreed. There's
a lot of people posting the story and sharing it and snickering and laughing behind their hands and pointing out, see, I told you so about the Warrens, when what the Warrens did is not, okay, let's face it. Let's back it up a little bit. Right. Not everybody's has a third person living in their house for 40 years.
Right.
That's a little bit of an extreme situation.
Yes.
But there's a lot of people that are in this world, people who are out on the road, people who are going to these conventions. There's a lot of hall passes that are giving in the paranormal. Sometimes there's hall passes given. Sometimes people don't realize that they signed a hall pass that they didn't know that they signed. If you get what I'm saying. Sometimes people have the okay. Sometimes people are doing it behind people's backs.
I was going to say, hold on. Let's get a little bit more specific here because you're losing me.
So there is a great deal of this going on. Now, listen, I'm not a dentist. I'm not, an electronic salesman. I'm not, what else? Who else gets any other profession or any other hobby or interest that has conventions and get-togethers and all that? I'm not involved in any of those worlds. So I can't tell you if this is something that goes on at a lot of these things. I imagine that to some degree it does. I imagine that, we always saw, the TV shows growing up and, where the father is going off to some convention and the mother's worried about what he's going to be doing when they're gone. These storylines exist. These things happen.
Right.
But it does seem to be more prevalent in the world that we are in.
Now, is it more prevalent or is it just because we know about it?
That's the question that I'm asking.
Okay.
Is this far worse than... we have people in the chat room and people that are listening to the show that are part of other worlds that are beyond the paranormal and might be able to say, hey, listen, I'm a dentist and every year we go to this dental convention in Chicago.
Maybe
and
they're wild.
It's well known that during these conventions, it's nothing but hookups.
Right.
So maybe that's possible. But I do think that the social aspect of the paranormal world plays into this to some degree.
I don't know. I mean, I've made jokes for years that the paranormal was full of people that didn't have any friends in high school because they're all a bunch of bullies. But
I'm not trying to hurt anybody's
No,
feelings,
not
but
either.
the basic idea is there's a lot of folks that are in this because it's where they found acceptance.
correct. But it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe it is. More prevalent here. Maybe it's not. But I think there's going to be a lot going on at any convention or any, particular industry group or entertainment group or whatever it might be. Paranormal people can't be the only one. And I can say I went to a lot of conventions this year, and I honestly stayed to myself for the most part, unless I was contracted to go somewhere. So I'm not the best at providing, insider scoop or information for this sort of stuff, but I have heard a lot of stories over the years and from very trusted sources. And I know, things do go on and things do happen, but let people be who they are and do their own thing. It doesn't really affect your life. Unless it does for some weird reason.
There is a lot of resentment toward people like the Warrens because they had a spotlight.
Yes.
And
but you know what? That goes for anybody in the spotlight. There's a resentment against them. I can't tell you the crap I've dealt with lately because...
But the question is, they put themselves in
Correct.
that spotlight. So...
Well, you know what, though?
Is this a situation where you probably, the whole glass houses thing?
I'm thinking right now of how I want to respond to this, because in a way, yes, it is. If you're forcing yourself out there and you want it so badly, then okay, fine. But I can speak for myself when I say that I was not actively seeking this and was not looking to become famous and caring about the fortune. And I have had things thrown my way that I didn't deserve at all, and that had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the people that I surround myself with, or it has to do with people that are representing me, or whatever it might be. And that stuff's not fair because I haven't done anything but try to help people with their grief. So it depends. I think it depends on who you are in the situation.
But there's a big difference. I mean, if you look back at the Warrens' career,
or just like
what
Chip
they
said,
did.
Chip is out doing the same thing that I'm doing, and he had horrible things said about him, which he did not deserve and were not warranted whatsoever. And didn't even apply.
It's still different, and I'm trying to explain how it is different. First of all, this era is different.
Mm-hmm.
So this era is, we live in a time now when people are looking for, news stories, television shows, magazine articles, what have you. Any type of lens is looking for people that are in the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different story in the 1970s when you are, basically contacting media outlets and saying, hey, come see what it is that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're it's kind of a hard thing because in some ways, a lot of people that are involved in the paranormal, they do invite it. They're saying like, I want to get on TV. I want to do this. I want to do that. But the climate has already been created for them to jump into that.
Mm-hmm.
This was different. This was somebody that was coming out and saying, hey, come and look at me. Come and see what it is that I'm doing. It's really cool and different and unique. And, should you be drawing that attention to yourself if you're basically going to be living a lie?
How many people do we know that do that?
Right, but you're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about back then. It's two different things in my mind, only because there's a saturation of it now.
Right.
So there's people that want that content. There's people that want that story to tell.
Right.
And there's people that want to consume that story.
Well, we also didn't have social media back then either.
Also, though, like social media is kind of everybody saying, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different when you're contacting, who, and I'm not going to pretend to know off the top of my head who it was they were reaching out to, but they were reaching out to people. They're putting themselves into these situations and then calling the media.
Mm-hmm.
Like, The Conjuring 2, for anybody that saw it, it's dealing with the Enfield poltergeist case, but it wasn't Ed and Lorraine Warren that were the people that were the key figures in that case. They just had a very passing happenstance in that case.
Right.
But it was, a headline story that they went and kind of inserted themselves into. And so there was a lot of that in their day. Amityville is a perfect case of that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't their story to tell, but they put themselves into that story.
So are you leaning toward the argument that they may have asked for it?
I'm putting into
or should have been aware that it
I'm saying,
happen.
like, if you're going to be into that position, maybe at some point you say maybe that girl should move out.
Okay.
Like, maybe you say...
But...
Like I said to Chip, you have to be careful of what it is that you're doing. And maybe at some point they should have said, let's evaluate what's going on here.
Well, it sounds like from this article that they had the perfect excuse. That she was just a relative or a niece that was staying and watching the house and all of this stuff. So I think that they probably had them... They thought they had themselves covered. And I also believe, that this stuff was happening and this was going on, and it's no different than today. The only difference is we do have the internet, we do have, smartphones and everything else, and the information flow is much quicker than it was back then. It's the same thing as, people saying, oh, crime wasn't bad back then. No, it was. It just meant that it didn't make the news as quick as it does now.
And that's one of the things that is the other part of this is in that time period, in that era, you could live with this secret and not have it get exposed.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about how the family knows. The family knew.
Right.
Their daughter knew. Their son-in-law knew. I don't want to speculate about other people knowing. That's just...
Right.
The question is out there. I'm sure it's popping into people's heads because John Zaffis was their nephew and worked with them, but I'm not pretending to even know what he thinks. I did reach out to him to see if he wanted to come on.
Yep.
But he didn't get back to me. So, but at least in this story, it mentions the Sparrows knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that they didn't know the situation. They thought that it was just that they took her in and she was part of the family.
Yep.
According to what's in the story. So maybe that's what their thought process was, is that that's how it would be portrayed. And you know what? Maybe that's what the relationship was to them. Maybe that's the way that they looked at the relationship. Maybe they looked at it as, we have this young girl that we took in and lives with us and is part of our family. And, just her and Ed have a different type of a bond.
Right.
But you still have to know the optics of it. You still have to know how it's going to look to people. And so then maybe you say, hey, at some point, maybe we should go get an apartment. Ed can go visit you at his apartment. But I don't know.
Do you think that adds a little validity to their side of the story?
What do you mean?
Because that would be an obvious choice for people to be we're kind of a big deal now, and we're in the public light. Maybe you shouldn't move. Maybe you shouldn't live here. Maybe you should move out. Does that the fact that they didn't ask her to move? Do you think that adds to their story of we were just helping this girl out?
Right. You're saying that they basically didn't see anything wrong.
Right.
So I don't know. Because she's coming out and claiming, Penny's coming out and claiming that there was that sexual relationship, then that makes me worry. Now, I didn't read the story. I would have to read the story again to kind of find this out. But at some point, I'm assuming her and Ed stopped sleeping together. And if that happened relatively early, then it's quite possible that she just became part of the family and that part of their life was over. And that's a possibility.
That's true.
I could certainly see that happen. That's a lot of marriages. A lot of marriages get to that point, when people reach a certain stage in their marriage or a certain age and that part of their life no longer becomes part of what it is that they do. It doesn't mean that they love each other any less. It doesn't mean that they don't want to stay with each other and be in each other's company. It just means that's no longer part of the equation. And so, I don't know, maybe that is, again, the basis of this all is that what went on in their home is none of our business.
Right.
But what they decided to do outside of their home is what is fair game. And it's where we can say, well, does this cast... The bottom line is, and we kind of touched on this a little bit with Chip, you have to understand when you do this kind of work that people are going to always be looking for a way to expose you as being a fraud. And you really can't give them any inch to make that argument with. And I think that that's a lesson that needs to be learned across the entire paranormal world.
Yes.
Because you want to cry and bitch about credibility, but then you're going to constantly do things to undermine your own credibility.
Right.
And that's where, that's kind of the morality lesson that we can take out of all of this is, it's not just about whether or not you should have a third party in your marriage. It's really about, do you have to hold yourself in a higher regard if you're doing this work? And is that fair? Is it fair that you have to? Because I think that you, A, do have to hold yourself in a higher regard, and B, it sucks that you do. Because nobody says that a dentist is a shitty dentist if they find out that he was cheating on his wife. Mm-hmm. It doesn't affect how he was able to work on your teeth. You might not like him as a person. You might not choose to go see him anymore because you don't agree with his values, but it doesn't mean that he was bad at being a dentist. Just like the same thing with politicians that are getting accused of all this stuff. If it's true, it doesn't mean that they were bad politicians. It just means that they were bad people.
Right.
And you might choose to say, I don't want bad people representing me, and that's fine. And you're totally allowed to have that opinion. But that also doesn't mean, people look at Ted Kennedy and they talk about how Ted Kennedy was nothing but a dirty philanderer and all this stuff. But people that liked his politics will say he was a damn good senator and he did a lot of good in the time that he was there. So just because he was a shitty person doesn't mean that he was a shitty senator.
Correct.
And you kind of, it's almost like it's...
I think people are just so quick to judge and pass blame or whatever because it makes them feel better about all the mistakes that they've made themselves, or it makes them feel better about themselves in general, or it just takes the heat off of things that they've done. And it's just silly.
And it's also a false morality in a lot of ways. It's also an unnecessary morality too in a lot of ways, because you're putting these restrictions on other people that might not have to do with their belief set. Just because you believe it doesn't mean that they have to believe it. And I honestly think that this whole idea of being polyamorous is the phraseology for it.
Yep.
But I don't think that makes you a bad person.
Again, what they do behind closed doors in their bedroom doesn't make you a good or a bad person.
Let's just say it was completely public. Let's just say that they made no bones about it. And they went out on tour together and it's like, hi, I'm Ed. This is my wife, Lorraine, and this is my girlfriend, Penny.
Yep.
And so then it's something that's out there in the public. It's not their own private lives. It's something, and maybe Ed saying, we go out and we battle demons, but we think it's okay to have an extra partner in your relationship. And it's all out there. Like because your morality says that it's wrong, it doesn't mean that it's wrong.
No, I mean, totally unrelated, but let's talk about a very popular book that was, I don't know if I can say the name of it or not, that came out within the last few years that was made into, a movie series where it completely, praised a man for controlling a woman in a sexual sense. The entire book was all about that. And women across the country, across the world, were going insane.
Are you talking about 50 Shades of Crap?
Yes. I don't know if I was allowed to say it on air or not.
You can say 50 Shades of Crap.
Or,
because that's what I call it, because it's a crap book. Not that I read it. But.
If you start reading into it and you start looking at it, all these women were so... I personally, I've read excerpts. I have not read the book. But to me, I just didn't have any interest in it. But all these women are, going insane over... what was being described in the book, but what was being described in the book can also be looked at as abuse. Why are we okay with that, but not okay with the story?
If the guy didn't have money, then it would be abuse.
Exactly.
I didn't
exactly.
I didn't read the
if
book.
If he wasn't rich,
but was I didn't read the book, but was the protagonist not a willing party to what was going on?
It was like a business deal. Like she accepted. But
so
again,
like
because
Pretty Woman, but with a ball gag.
Oh my God. It was
and more gerbils.
And
Oh, wait,
more,
that was-
and more, and more durable.
More durables, yes.
Oh my God. But again, he came across as, he has this glamorous life, and it just, again, like Matt said, if he didn't have money, it would be, the dude would be in jail for what he did. But, we praised that as a society. And that's kind of
I
ridiculous.
thought it was terrible.
No, I didn't either, but
I thought the whole phenomena around it was terrible.
right. But women went nuts for it. So why is that okay? But a situation like this is news.
My argument was kind of a different take on it. My argument was, if that was a book that was written by a man for other men to read,
Yes.
women would think it was filth and pornography.
Oh, absolutely. Agreed.
So if I had that book and it wasn't this phenomena around women and what
Yep.
have you, but if I had that book and, my wife came home and found it, she'd probably be pissed that
Yep.
I had it. And I think that that's unfair.
Right. Everything should be looked at for what it is.
I'm not to talk about my relationship here, but there's a double standard where you might be, I'm going to look at Matt in this because he's a guy.
All right.
You might be sitting at home watching like Cinemax
Right.
after dark, or
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah, I don't do that.
or a
I think-
movie,
I think-
or you're watching a movie,
Red Shoe Diaries, yeah.
a show or a movie that has some sexual graphic content in it, and
Right.
then your significant other comes into the room and is like, "What are you watching?" And basically tries to make you feel bad for what it is that you're watching. But then you go into the room and it's, a lesbian prison scene in Orange is the New Black, or, some incest scene on Game of Thrones. And you say, "What are you watching?" And like, "What? This is good. This is a good show. Everybody watches this. This is art."
Right.
I might be different, but I wouldn't give a shit.
I think
This is
the difference
weird
is,
that you guys are swearing, because every time you swear, I'm like,
I
know.
think the difference is, if you actually put your hand in your pants, that makes it pornography.
you think so? If there
Yeah.
are pants involved,
I think, but that's the thing is, like, if I'm watching TV, my hand is probably in my pants anyway.
you do the Al Bundy.
What is
Al
happening?
Bundy, dude.
What's going on
Dude,
right now?
Don't show me pictures.
Right? I was going to say, why are we
No,
both
I'm showing
on
you
the
that.
phone?
Okay.
Hold on.
You can show that to.
The Al Bundy screensaver.
Al Bundy's my hero.
Well,
That's
good to
great.
know. Good to know.
See, I just wanna,
You're a member, no man.
I am. But I think that's the difference. Is I think that if you can watch it and restrain yourself, then it's art. But if you watch it and you're like, I think I want to.
Stop it.
Dim the
I've only-
lights a little. Light a
only-
couple candles.
Nah, you just put on a blanket. I'm just I'm just taking advantage of the YouTube here to go too far. That's all.
Right. Just push it while it's there, right?
So, but anyway, we've fallen off track, which we stayed surprisingly on track for most of the show. So
We
I'm
didn't talk about food yet.
I'm gonna call that a feather in our cap. Well, we're not going to yet because
Okay.
I do want to talk
You
about
don't
one
mix
other
food
thing.
and sex.
I want to talk about one other thing
No, you
that's
don't.
come up in the
No?
last couple of
No.
weeks.
Why?
Like what? Like a sandwich?
Like pizza.
Pizza and sex?
Why not?
Before or after?
A sex pizza.
Doesn't matter.
I think it does.
She's
Does it?
She's just mad
let's talk about
because
this.
she thought that the DME was coming in with pizza, so that's why
Yeah.
she got pizza.
I happen to like pizza, but okay, now we have to discuss it. Why not pizza before sex or after sex?
Well, for
No,
one,
we're talking
like,
about during. Food is fine.
But he just said before and after. So he said before,
Before
or
or
after, and
after?
I said, does it matter? And he said yes. Why does it matter?
well, I mean, it depends on how greasy the pizza is. If you want
Okay.
greasy fingers?
Well, pizza also gives you pizza farts too. So
True that.
So not before, definitely after.
Mhm.
That solves the greasiness problem and the farting. Because apparently you get the pizza farts. Great.
Right.
Awesome.
no, I think incorporating food into it is a different story. But
Okay.
food before or after, I'm not going to argue with that. That's fine.
Pizza.
It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I would prefer not pizza,
Okay.
but just because
Then what? What's your choice?
it's like kind of like one of those things. It doesn't really kind of go with what happened. Pizza's kind of like
more
a,
like a calzone would be more sensual.
like a nice sub.
Okay.
A nice sub. A nice tuna sub would be like a foot long tuna sub.
A Big Bear sandwich?
Right.
With, I think that would be good. With plenty of whipped cream on it. No, my thought process is that pizza is more of like a like grabbing a quick bite to eat
Uh-huh.
or,
Well, you
know,
need
it's-
fuel.
Yeah, no, it's anyway, that's a whole different thing. We only have a few minutes left because even though we're on YouTube, we're going to try and stick to the clock to some degree. I want to ask you about this other story that's popped up in the last couple of weeks, and it's similar to what we're talking about here, where it's somebody who's in the public eye, and their personal life has become fodder for people, and that's I'm talking about Teresa Caputo and this whole story that broke over the last couple of weeks, where apparently, and for those who don't know, and I really don't know that much about her, but she's the Long Island medium.
Yep.
And the story goes, now her husband is part of the show.
Yes.
Because I see people that have taken pictures with him and stuff, and he looks really douchey, so I'm assuming that he must be on TV, because like people shouldn't look that way. Although he does live on Long Island. That's a little dig at our Long Island friends. But he, this guy is part of the show, so he's in the public eye too. And their marriage was part of the show, right? That was something that was discussed. So now the story comes out this week, or the last couple of weeks, where they're separating.
Yes.
Another story came out, I believe it was a separate story, that was that there's an investigator who has been investigating her and has deemed her to be a fraud, which every time an investigator deems something to be fake, I think obviously, they must know exactly what they're talking about. But he says facetiously. But those two stories kind of come out at the same time. So a lot of people are putting those pieces together where they don't necessarily go together.
So I was a fan of the show at one point. I don't have time for TV anymore, but I watched it for a very long time. Her husband was a big part of the show because it was based around her family life as well. He wasn't really douchey. He kept to himself and he was quiet for the most part. But he was very supportive of everything that she did, more so than her children. Her children kind of came across as douchey. And like, mom's embarrassing us type deal. Those two articles did come out very close together. Which I don't believe was fair. And I know you and I have had many discussions on our opinions as to that article and the supposed investigator. That article was so poorly written, it wasn't even funny.
I think we have another call.
I know, that's why I paused.
Let's just take this call real fast.
Okay.
Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, am I on the air?
You
Yes.
are, yes.
Hi, how are you? How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing quite all right.
Is there a question or something? Point? Something that we're talking about? That.
I'm sorry, you're a bit quiet, but it's okay.
Okay, Oh yo!
I'm sorry.
It's our phones. I'm sorry. It's just the phones really low. I apologize.
Oh, okay. I'm kind of new to the stream, so
That's quite okay.
I do have comments I want to say.
Do you have a question for us or a point about what we were talking about?
I'm sorry.
I said, do you have a question for us or a comment about anything that we were discussing?
Yeah, I have something I want to say.
Okay.
Regarding psychological and neurological deficiencies and how it relates to free will.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. You're on the air. The floor is yours.
All right, so pretty much there are those who suffer psychologically and emotionally from neurological and or genetic deficiencies, but it changes nothing. Sure, they inherited a bad hand and are not to blame, but I don't view it as being much different from a short guy wanting a date and not being to blame for it. And in the long view of things, it kind of relates to free will, how no one, in a deterministic sense, really chooses their position in life.
Okay. So that, in relation to what we've been discussing tonight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I think we'll leave it there. That's a good way to end it.
What just happened?
I wasn't following.
Okay.
But we're out of time, and it wasn't on point, on topic of what we were discussing.
Okay.
So, and you know me, I don't usually hang up on people, but
I was gonna say, did you just do that?
I did more just because I was just thinking that we were going down a path that was not where we wanted to go with 7 minutes left in the show.
Okay.
Or 3 minutes now.
I gotta be honest with you. I thought it might have been one of our prank callers. But back to topic of discussion with Teresa. Where do you want to go with that? Because that might be more than the 7 minutes we have.
I just wanted to bring up the fact that that is, first of all, like you said, it's not something that was,
Right.
those stories weren't connected.
Yep.
Her husband did not decide to leave her because of this story exposing her as a fraud.
No.
I'm pretty sure if she was a fraud, he would have known before any kind of
The
exposition
show was
story came
actually
out.
following the problems that they were having for quite some time. So this was not a surprise or anything. I mean, they just showed an episode where she broke down crying in the middle of her her reading because the reading was relating to her issues with her husband, and it broke her down. So it's something that she was very open with and very raw about and very emotional about.
And because that became part of the show,
Yes.
now that is something that is public fodder
Correct.
because they chose to make it that way.
Yep. And she agreed to it.
Not the way I would go if I was on TV.
No,
but-
I mean, but at the same time, it doesn't discredit her. I don't think it takes away from any type of gift that she has. I have seen her live. I have my own opinion, which I was open with on your Facebook page, that there's no reason to call her a fraud. I know people that I consider mentors are friends with her. So, and you know who I'm talking about. He mentioned her on our show. So I just don't see why we need to attack her. And every single point that stupid article made about the investigation, about her and her gifts and everything else was every single point that someone that is ignorant to what a medium does for a living would make as a point for somebody being a fraud. It's just silly.
I'm going to try and squeeze in one more call here, and we'll
Okay.
see where it's going. I thought about something while you were talking, and I wonder, because I can't hear what's on the radio right now,
Yep.
that call might have been in relation to what's on
It's
the
on the-
air.
okay.
And it might not have fit into our... That's why it didn't fit into the conversation that we were having.
Okay.
So we'll just go back. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast.
Hello, am I on the air?
Yes, you are.
All right.
Do you have something to say? We only got a few minutes left, so if you want to make a point, I'd do it pretty quickly.
Yeah, so about the allegations and all of that that's been going on in today's time, where do you stand on that?
On just the idea in general of the allegations, or specific allegations?
Just without the proof, just all that, like, hashtag Me Too and all the things going on in today's media.
Where do we stand personally?
Well, I do think that you have to, anybody that's willing to come out and say that they're a victim, you have to at least be willing to listen to what they're saying. But I also think that there has to be some proof to that too. You just can't make baseless claims and not kind of provide some, just your word alone, although it should be enough, unfortunately it isn't. So you need to have a little bit more of something to back that up. And in terms of the case that we're talking about tonight with the Warrens, we can talk about this information of what happened because that was something that was submitted in an affidavit as part of a lawsuit separate from these instances.
He hung up on me.
No, we're still here. Maybe you couldn't hear our response.
Hello?
I don't know. This is getting weird. This is like where it's kind of the point. This is like where they're kind of just saying you guys should wrap up the show. Just to be fair, I hung up on that person now because they weren't replying, but I did not hang up on anybody.
I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. However, we could probably cover the Teresa Caputo story in an entire show. And I got to write that blog for you too.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up. Were you going to say something, Matt? Or you? Okay.
I think he's trying to check out, see what's going on.
I just wanted to bring that up and, just kind of clarify. Because, again, like we just said that we just spent 2 hours talking about how what happened in the Warrens' home was their business and should it affect the way people see their work? We're asking that question and kind of likening it to the Teresa Caputo situation. That's different because they chose to put all of that personal stuff out there for people to consume and pass judgment on. So there is some difference to that. But certainly we can discuss it again in the future.
Right.
We'll be back next Saturday night for another show. It'll be our pre-Christmas show because it's 2 days before Christmas. So, if Santa Claus wants to join us, that's good. Last year we had Jesus. So...
My God, I forgot about that.
Speaking of Jesus, I got one
Stop
more
it.
weird story to share with you in the audience before we go tonight. So we've mentioned this before, I think, on the air, that in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, which is where the Spooky Studio is located, it's where we broadcast from. In Fairhaven, we have a guy known as Fairhaven Jesus.
Yes, we do.
His name is Mel. He dresses up as Jesus, complete with the crown of thorns, and he walks up and down one of the main roads in Fairhaven, and people beep, and he waves, and he's got a staff, and he prays with people, and people take pictures with him and everything, and he's out there. He was a guy who had some trouble in his life, and he ended up in jail. And when he was in jail, God talked to him, and God told him to go out and do this. So he does. Interestingly enough, when Fairhaven Jesus leaves Fairhaven for the winter, he goes down to Florida.
Correct.
And where does he go in Florida?
Fort Myers.
The town that Chris Balzano lives in. The guy who is, synonymous with Spooky South Coast for all these years. So that was kind of an odd connection, I thought. That Fairhaven Jesus, of all the places he could go, he goes to Chris Balzano's town. Now, I know Fort Myers is a big destination point, but still, just seems really weird. So yesterday, Balzano reaches out to me and says, hey, that guy that's on your radio station from 10 to 12, what's his name? So Brian Thomas. Brian the cab driver, as a lot of listeners know him as. Yeah. I think his son works at the school that I work at. So Brian's here. So I go into Brian's office and I say, Brian, where's your son teaching these days? Because I know his son's a teacher. And he says, well, he was on the Cape, but now he's down in Florida. And I mentioned the name of the school and he says, yeah. Did you know it? I said, Chris Balzano, longtime content director and contributor to Spooky South Coast, works with him at the same school. How odd is that?
Very.
So Fairhaven Jesus, Brian's son.
Very odd.
There's some sort of weird connection. And Chris told me, and I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but he's discovered some odd paranormal things down his way that he's starting to research, and he's going to report on to us at some point. So
does it fall on a ley line?
Maybe we're on the same ley line. That would make sense why the Red Sox chose that as their spring training home, and why so many people go down there in the summer. Either that or just because it was, a nice destination. And what's even weirder is now the New Bedford airport has a flight that goes to Vero Beach, which is not that far from Fort Myers. It's like a half an hour out, I think, or something like that. So all those weird
seconds
could get even weirder. It's just following the ley line. It's just following the ley line. All right, so we will be back next week with another show. Until then, for Stephanie, I'm Tim. We want you all to stay spooktacular.